Thank you, everyone, for being here at this hour. It's been a long day, so I'm glad you're here. After this talk, you'll be able to handle Git like a master builder. So I just wanted to know beforehand, who of you uses Git? I guess quite a lot, yes. Who uses it on the console? Okay, I'm preaching to the choir here. And who had a problem with Git? Yes. All right then, so if you already know something, don't feel bored. I will start at the very, very basic, but I'll be picking up speed pretty quickly. If you're a beginner, don't be afraid. There's the slides online and you can look it up, and most probably you won't run into those problems, hopefully. And all of this is based on my personal style and experiences. Yes, I really heard all those stories you're going to hear. And I know there's more than one way to do things, but that's just the way I solve the problems, and we can discuss afterwards. Just a little bit about me. Before the year 2011, I was an international secretary at a big consulting company. I speak 4 languages. I managed the calendars of my 4 bosses. I lived for half a year in New Zealand, and I did lots of photography. And in 2011, I decided to study web design and development. And since then, I'm a very, very happy person. I go to conferences, give talks, and in my everyday life, I work at Trivago as a PHP developer, where I do things like A/B test handling, translations management, rights management, and I also build the administrative tools to handle all of that. So, as you can imagine, when I started my new job as a developer, my colleague sat next to me and told me, we will learn Git on the command line, because the command line is the only place where you can run all the commands. So the GUIs will only implement a subset of the most usual things that you will normally use. And yeah, you can figure out how the GUI version works if you know how the command line works. And additionally, I had an RSI, for the Germans hier Sehnenscheidenentzündung, on my right hand because of using the mouse. So typing for me is better and faster. And pro tip, learn 10-finger typing really helps. So my colleague sat right next to me and told me, yeah, you have to type now git pull. And then you type git add dot, and then you type git commit, and type some message, and then you type git push. And I was, yeah, what? Push to where and add what? I had one of those big what the fuck moments. Yeah, and I guess that's the way almost everybody learns it. You just get thrown into it and you repeat the commands that everyone tells you, and you just use them without thinking a lot. So for me, that's not enough. I decided to read the documentation, and I found out there's actually some kind of context that goes through all of that. So that all makes now way more sense if you put all those commands into perspectives and have little arrows between them. But let's talk about those things, those different layers that are here. So it's the workspace, the stage are also called index, the local repository, and the remote repository. Also, still pretty abstract. I have pictures. So the workspace, you can imagine, is like the desk that you sit on and that you're working on. Pretty straightforward. The stage or index, you can imagine like a packaging station where you wrap all your neat little packages to be committed. The local repository, I imagine like the shelf with my very cute and things that I'm proud of. And the remote repository is, of course, a remote location where all your code is kept safe. Also, please, if you only work for yourself, really have the remote repository actually remote. I heard of a person who had the remote installed on his local computer. Not how you do it. Also, if you do this, please do backups. So if you just want to have a look around in Git, you can use git diff, which just shows you the difference between the different, I will say, layers. So git diff you just use to see the difference between the stage and the workspace. I use git diff staged every time before I'm about to commit, just to see that I'm not committing some debugging code or something else that I should not commit. Oh, and by the way, whenever you see this yellow flag, that's a command line flag, so things you can add to the command that is always in the subheading. So -w is a very handy command for git diff because it excludes all the white space changes. So if you have a little war with your colleague about tabs and spaces, you can just ignore this and just see the actual changes. And we will talk about this head thing later in more detail. So when you're working, you're just about to go home, you want to commit and push, and Git now tells you, bah, no, you cannot push because there's a merge conflict, and when you try to pull, it tells you, that also doesn't go, and you have to solve the conflict first. This is quite a stressful scenario. You will need a merge tool for that, and this is what happens quite a lot, especially if you work with lots of people on one branch or one team. So if you type git merge tool, normally a merge tool will open, and the Git documentation actually recommends that you use a graphical merge tool and not the command line. I personally, most of the time, just use PHP Storm because I'm a PHP developer. I have all my code highlighting in there, and it's just the quickest way for me to access this. But there's dozens of merge tools on the market, free and paid for. But this scenario, so you're just finished working, you actually want to go home, is quite stressful, and you need the willpower of a hero to solve this, a superhero to solve this. So what I prefer to do is to use the stash. The stash is, you can imagine, like the drawer under your desk, where you just push the things aside that you don't want to work on now because you're working on something different or more important now. So put it into your drawer. Then you can retrieve your stashes, merge the conflicts that you need to. Technically, there's no difference between the scenario before that and this scenario. Technically, no difference at all. But if you do this while you're working, you're still in problem-solving mode, so at least for me, that's the case. So I'm not stressed out about it as much as I'm wanting to go home and get over with it. It's just why I like this approach better. Let's talk a little bit about branches. So branches, I draw this little timeline. So this is time. Those are the different branches. The checked out branch always has an asterisk before it, also on the command line. And each of those bubbles is a commit. And when you're at the end of the branch and the one you have checked out, that is the head. So it has the double circle around it. So if you want to switch between branches, you type git checkout branch name. And if you want to switch between two branches, you type git checkout minus, which is way shorter and way easier to remember than always having to remember which branch you were in right now. It's just like cd minus where you switch folders on the command line. If you want to create a new branch, you type git checkout -b and the new branch name. This is just a shortcut for creating a new branch and then checking it out. You can also do that. And I recommend to also merge the master quite often so the two branches won't diverge too much, and then merging it again will cause a lot of merge conflicts because the history grew out of sync so much. If you want to look at the history, you can use git checkout and a hash, or git checkout head. Again, head comes in just a few minutes. So if you can check out then, and then Git tells you you're in a detached head state. That means you can look around, you can make changes, you can commit them, you can discard those commits, but you cannot push. So how do you get this hash? The hash you can get with typing git log. So I used git log --graph --1 line, where I get this nice little representation that is basically the same representation you get in every GUI, but just a little bit more simple, but works just the same. And the green numbers there are the hash that you just used to check out a previous version. Okay, about that head notation. So what you generally do is when you run into a problem with Git, you go onto Stack Overflow, and then you see weird notations with add signs, and you just trust the person who wrote that because you don't really know what this is all about. So I would like to explain that because I was always confused by that. Git checkout head ~1 means the commit before head. So if you take the topmost green bubble and ~1 is the one right below it. Straightforward, ~2 would be the 2 below it. Clear? Clear. And so git checkout head circumflex 1 means the first parent of the head. So if you go to the topmost gray bubble, that means the gray bubble below it. But the topmost gray bubble has two parents, the orange one also. So that would be head circumflex 2. You can also go to the reflog and see a detailed list of all the changes that the head went through. And there you get this adds curly brackets notation, which is, for me, a very much nicer overview. So you can have a look at that. You can just see all the stages. It's like a way more detailed log where you can really see where the head went through. That is, for me, much easier to understand than to try to imagine how to which was the previous version. For just going back one, just use the tilde. Okay, if you want to actually go back, so reset things, you can use reset hard, and that will remove the commit, and all your work and all your uncommitted changes are lost forever. So be careful with that. And reset soft undoes the last commit, and that puts the changes back into your workspace as if they were never committed, which is very, very handy. So imagine you have a really, really bad day. You did not get enough sleep, maybe a little bit hungover. You're late in the office, you only had half a coffee because you had to rush so much. And of course, you're greeted with, we need an urgent bug fix from you. So obviously, what you do is you start working in master because you just checked it out. And the way to solve it is to stash everything away, check out a new branch, retrieve the stashes, and then go on working as usual. If you already have if you want to create a new branch, then you don't need to check out always. Sometimes retrieving the stash causes some conflicts. And Git is so clever that normally when you pop a stash, so that means retrieve it and delete it from the list, it does not delete it from the list when there's a conflict, which is very cool. So you can just undo everything and go on working with and ignore the stash and just keep it in your stash list. It can also happen that you find in your list a stash that is really, really old, and you're really, really afraid to apply it because there might be conflicts. So you can have a look into the stash with show -p to actually see the differences. And you can create a new branch from the stash at the stage the stash was created, which is very cool. So you can have a look in there, and if that really all makes sense and you want to keep it, you can merge that branch into your working branch. Yeah, so you go on working, you're still not 100% there, and you realize you had a typo in your branch name, which you can easily rename by using the -m notation, which is basically just a shortcut for move, and therefore rename the branch. Please do not do that if the branch was already pushed or there's even a pull request. Do not do that. Your colleagues will hate you. You go on and you realize that you accidentally staged your config local file with your database password. And you don't want that in there. So you already added the config local to the git ignore, but still Git says, haha, I added it. What you want to do is to type git rm, so remove --staged, and then the file name. Do not forget the --staged, or otherwise the file will actually be deleted. So now, what? No, it's just like rm on bash. It's gone. No, it's okay. So now the file is not tracked anymore, and it's in the git ignore, so you're safe to commit without this file appearing anywhere. And you go on working, and you realize you have a typo in your commit message, or more actually, because you don't like Git any much so more, you have more or less commit messages like this. And in the end, you don't want that in your history. So you would like to amend the commit message and change it to something else that is more valuable and readable to the future user. Also today, you're a little bit clumsy and you forgot to commit a file. Also, this is one of the things that you don't want to do if you already pushed, because your colleagues won't like you anymore. But if you have not pushed already, you can add the missing file and also type git commit amend, which will just add the file to the previous commit. Actually, you thought about all of this, and all of this amending was bullshit and you want it gone. So you do a reset and do a git commit -C on the first head. And the capital C means that you will reuse the log message, the author, and the timestamp. Luckily, you can not use this flag on any other command if you have not committed before. So that's only for undoing the amending. actually, the whole branch that you worked on is complete garbage and needs to be gone. So you want to delete it with -d. And sometimes Git will tell you, yeah, -d is not enough, I need something more. Then you use a capital D, which is basically force deleting it. And then you, of course, need to push to the origin that it's already gone. Okay, this was very, very technical and a little bit dry. So I want you to all wake up. And the trick that I use if I can't have any coffee right now is I cross my arms and I want you to go on with it. Come on. Cross your arms. And massage your ears as if you want to unroll the fold at the very end until they're red. And I'm serious. So what this does by crossing the hands is you also cross the brain hemispheres. So the corpus callosum, which is the nerve thing between your brains, gets thicker, by the way, if you do crossing things. And the red ears also, of course, bring more blood to your head, which is good if you want to do some thinking. So everyone's awake and everyone's smiling. It's good. We can go on. Also, pretty common thing that you committed broken code and pushed it. And this is Git's safest undo scenario because you don't actually alter the history. So you do a revert and then a new commit. And this is basically you take out everything that you committed and put in your things. See, again, this is crossing arm things. So it sounds way more complicated than it is, but once you've done it, you will realize it's pretty straightforward. This also happens quite some time to me that I committed and pushed to the wrong branch. So you make sure that you're in the wrong branch, do a reset, check out a new branch, retrieve your stash, then commit everything and push it to the branch you actually want to have it. And then you check out the wrong branch again and force it to the origin. Of course, you do not do that on master, and you do not do that on a branch that someone else works on. But you can also use cherry pick, and we go to that later. Before we talked about the detached head state. So you can do a lot of things there, so make changes and commit, but you cannot push. So once you try to push in a detached head state, Git will tell you, cannot do that, I don't want this. So you can actually create a new branch from the detached head state with your previous commits. And then, of course, what you want to do is merge the latest version of the master or the branch of or the source branch that you have into that, so you're at the actual state that you want. But I find that pretty cool that you just can create branches out of stashes and detached head states. So this is what happened to my colleague Janine a couple of weeks ago. She took over a task while her colleague Malte was on a conference in Italy. And she wanted to be nice and merge master into the feature branch, because that's what you do regularly. But in this case, there was lots of changes. So moved files, deleted files, moved files and deleted files. And I tried to help her, but we both could not figure out which was the right way to go, because there was no way to ask her colleague, and it was inconclusive. So we decided to just abort the merge. This just undoes the merge, and she could just go on working just like this never happened before. This was when my colleague already started with migrating from Symfony 2 to 3. So he added he had some changes to some config files that I wanted. But I did not want to branch off his branch because that leads to more complication. So try not to branch off a branch. Always branch off masters. It's always complicated. And so I decided to just check out the files from his branch. That only makes sense if you're just starting a new project because you will actually copy and not merge, and all your local files would be overwritten if you had any. But in my case, it made total sense because I just started a new project. He already had those config files, and I just copied them over to my branch. So the other thing is you can use a cherry pick if you need a single commit from another branch, where you just pick a commit from the other branch and port it to your branch and merge it into it. That happened when my colleague already started on working, switching from Vagrant to Docker. So there were also lots of config file changes and some edit. And so my colleague Benedict and I, we were doing like this little pilot project. So we should not commit those files so that my other colleagues could still go on working on their Vagrant machines. Oops. So I merged Benedict's branch into my branch. I used a reset soft for his latest changes. And then I just used the patch mode to only add my changes that I actually wanted in there. And the patch mode is actually a pretty cool thing because you can use only little snippets. You can only add little snippets to the files and not just the whole file. I basically only use yes and no and the question marks, and I guess you just remember that. And by the way, I found out it will also only give you the options that you can use. So at one point, I tried to use the S for split, but the option was not given there, so the split did also not work. Yeah, so you accidentally used a hard reset when you wanted to use a soft reset, and now your last commit is gone. Of course, your uncommitted changes are gone forever, but there's a way to retrieve the last commit via the ref log, because, as I said, the ref log is way more detailed than the actual log. As you can see when you type git log in the second line, there you can see just the first commit, while as you type git ref log, you can see all the changes that the head went through. So you see that head 0 means you moved the head, you made a reset, and the head 1 is your super important commit that you actually wanted to keep. So if you do a reset hard on the super important commit, then you have your super important commit back. This actually happened. So my colleague Japuk came to me at one day and said, yeah, someone named a branch composer.json, and I can't check it out on the command line, because whenever I try to type git checkout composer.json, it will check out the file and not the branch. yeah, it really happened. So we found out that you can actually trick Git into thinking that, in this case, composer.json is a branch by appending the minus minus. Remember that from checking out the file. So minus minus means we check out the file, but we don't give a file. But it makes clear to Git that the composer.json in this case is the branch. By the way, technically, you can name a branch head in capital letters. Don't, Helbril, break loose or something. I don't know. I have not tried it. I just know that theoretically it works, but this will cause chaos on very, very different levels. Good. We're now moving into the danger zone, and we're changing history. So this happened actually to one of our administrators. He committed and pushed his database password. One way to go about it is to use all of this. I will explain the things that I typed in different colors. So filter branch means you rewrite the branch. -- force, of course, you want to force push it. Index filter means you want to rewrite the filter. The green thing is what you actually want to do. You want to remove the, let's say, config local file. And prune empty means you want to remove empty commits that now may be existing. So maybe there's a commit where just this file was added, and now if you remove the file, this commit would be empty. So you also want to remove this commit. Tag name filter cat means you also want to rewrite all the tags, not just the branches. And -- all is you want to be extra sure that everything is in there. So you add your file to the git ignore, then you commit everything, and before you push all that, you do a dry run first with a --v for verbose to see if this actually works, because you've done a whole lot of changing in the history there. If this works, you push it all, force push it, and then you also push the tags. And then, if you talk to your colleagues, and it also works on their machines, and everything is fine, then you can go on and remove the dangling commits. So dangling commits are, you remember the timeline we had before with the little bubbles on there? So a dangling commit is not on the line anymore. It just sits there somewhere. That is normally not a problem, but someone that is very, very handy with Git can go into such a dangling commit and still see your database password. So you also want to remove those with the other lines. That is quite a thing, right? There's another option. I like this one. It's the nuclear option. And that basically just means you will delete your whole repository and create a new one. Pro tip, on GitHub, you will keep your stars if you create a new repository that is exactly named like the old one. So in this case, you can be absolutely sure that your password is gone because your history is gone. But your history is gone. So you will really have to see which of those two approaches more suits you. So what do you do when someone else changed the history? So I do hope when you change the history that you go to your colleagues and talk to them, because otherwise you will not only have merge conflicts, you will have interpersonal conflicts. You can rebase instead of merge when you pull, or you can stash your changes and do a reset if you still have those changes that you want to keep. Or if you're more the clean slate person, you can just delete the whole repository and check it out anew. It's my preferred way. There's a couple of things that we could have prevented if we had configured our Git more to our tastes. So this is what my actual command prompt looks like. I changed it a little bit, and there's a GitHub Git where you can copy that into your bash profile. So I have the user, so that's me, the Patrick. Then in yellow, I have the folder where I'm actually in. And then in blue with the brackets, I have the branch name, and the little asterisk means that the branch is dirty, so I have uncommitted changes there. For me, it's very handy to just have on one glance to see the branch that I'm in, so that I don't accidentally commit to the wrong branch. Also, you can have autocomplete in Git. That was a telescope word. So in my company, we have very long branch names because there needs to be a prefix for if it's a feature or a bug fix. Then the Jira ticket number, which always starts with, in my case, web and a 5-digit number. And then a description of the actual tasks, and that can also be very long, and I don't want to type that every time I want to check out a new file. So with this command that you execute one time on your command line, you can have autocomplete on Git, and that really makes it way more easier to handle, and especially with those long branch names. You could also just completely switch to ZSH, where most of these things are already in there. It's just a matter of taste if you prefer Bash or ZSH. And there's a couple of more configs that I like to do. So obviously, the first time you use Git, you want to configure your name and your email address. And because I work on a Mac, I also always want to exclude the dstore files. And because I work with PHP-Storm, I also always want to ignore the IDEA files. So those are in my global Git config. So I will never, ever accidentally commit those. There's people who apparently can't use or close Vim. So for those people, they can use another editor to type their commit messages. So I recommend that you just use Atom, because the name Atom is very short. And it's rather quickly loaded. So what you configure core editor Atom wait. And so every time you type git commit, Atom opens, you type your commit message, you save and close it, and then with it, you have committed. Pretty easy and straightforward as that. You want to configure your own merge tool, so I use meld whenever I don't use PHP-Storm, so in most cases I just use PHP-Storm, but sometimes you need something more. As said, my commit messages always have to start with web minus and the 5-digit number. So I edited my global commit message that it always starts with web minus, so it's not much, but I don't have to type those 4 characters every time. It's a little bit. And my personal favorite is the help autocorrect. So you can get away with typing git pull with 3L, or if you I always accidentally hit the hash key next to the return key and have that in my command, and Git will tell you, so, hey, you typed that wrong, I think you meant that, and I will just wait for 3 seconds until you decide it, and then just execute it, and if I don't want that, I can just hit Control-C to abort that. So, use the command line, but you already knew that. Commit early and commit often, really helps. Try not to push when you notice your error, and keep calm because almost everything can be undone. I hope you're happy now. Thank you. There's the link to the slides. Questions? Yeah? Yeah. No, so of course you also change your passwords. That is a given. So of course you do that anyway, but you still want the old password also gone for security reasons. Anyone else? No? I'll be here for a while, so you can come to me and also ask me questions in German if that's easier for you. Thank you very much. Oh, was there someone? Oh, sorry.